The first item of business is members' business debate on motion 20209 in the name of Miles Briggs on research projections into place of death in 2040. And this debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Miles Briggs to open the debate for around 7 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'd like to thank colleagues for supporting my motion and allowing today's debate to take place. As we start the new parliamentary term, this topic I've brought today for debate is maybe not the most cheery as we start Parliament back, but it is of vital importance, I know, to each and every one of our constituents and their families. And I'd also like to welcome to the public gallery representatives of Marie Curie, and I want to begin by paying tribute to the work of the charity and all its staff, nurses and volunteers who do so much for our constituents in every part of Scotland. I visited the Marie Curie Hospice in Edinburgh in the run-up to Christmas, and once again was incredibly impressed with the quality of care its staff are providing to terminally ill people across my own Lothian region, as well as the support and advice that it gives to family members at such a difficult time. Improving the care and support we offer to people at the end of life is an issue which I know every single MSP in this chamber supports. And I'd like to pay tribute to members across the chamber for the campaigning they've undertaken on this issue, including Dave Stewart, who I know is also looking to bring forward a debate in the future around this as well. And I commend the authors of the Place of Death report, Marie Curie, King's College London, the University of Edinburgh, and specifically the lead authors, Anne Finucane of Marie Curie and also Anne Bone of King's College London. The report identifies that there will be nearly 16% more deaths in Scotland by 2040, an increase from 57,700 to 65,700, with 45% of all deaths of people aged over 85. Now, we know that currently around 45,000 people die of a terminal illness requiring some form of palliative care or palliative pathway. This increase in the number of people, therefore, dying will bring with it thousands more people who will need palliative care each year. We also know that the number of people living with and dying with dementia, cancer and fertility is going to increase considerably, and that more and more people will be living with comorbidities and multimorbidities. The challenge, therefore, in getting the care right for these people is already a massive one, but clearly we need to start planning for the future, and that is what I hope today's debate can look towards. Now, I believe this Marie Curie-led research makes an important contribution to understanding what the future might look like and how the government and the health and care sector can respond to this challenge. The research shows that if current Scottish trends continue, then by 2040, community settings are likely to be the place where 2/3 of all deaths take place, hospital deaths accounting for a further third. Currently, around half of the people who die in hospital, such as the change aligned with the Scottish Government's ambitions of shifting the balance of care from acute to community. And we support that, and that's supported, I believe, across the chamber. However, it's vital to highlight that the research concludes that this scenario is very unlikely to actually happen, to be able to die at home, if community support and capability capacity is not radically increased. If this capacity is not increased in the community, then the research suggests that more and more people will end up dying in hospital, potentially peaking with over 37,000 people by 2040, representing 57% of all deaths, an increase of over 8,000 from 2016. Now, we know that the number of care homes and the number of care home places are currently falling in Scotland. Indeed, the number of care homes for older people fell by 10% between 2007 and 2017. The number of care home places have also fallen to just 37,278. So the sustainability of the care sector is also an important issue for us to consider. GP numbers are under pressure, and other professional groups, including district nursing, AHPs and social care teams, are struggling to provide care for their patients as the number decrease and vacancies are longer and harder to fill. All of these professional groups are essential in providing the support and multidisciplinary team which is needed for people with living with a terminal illness across our communities. A unique aspect of the research, therefore, was sharing the data of 27 experts, including policymakers, clinicians, health service managers, social care workers and educators, in drawing together some of the findings. Now, the experts were asked to identify priorities to support the shifting of care from acute to community settings, and by consensus identified three key priorities to support this outcome. The experts said the following needs to happen: an increase and upskilling of the community health and social care workforce through education, training and the value of our care workers, building community care capacity through informal carer support and community engagement, and stimulating the release of public debate on death, dying and sustainable funding for these services. So I hope in the Minister's reply to this debate, it would be useful to hear how the Scottish Government respond to these key priorities and what actions ministers will take forward in these areas. Specifically, it would also be helpful if the Minister pledged to write to each health and social care partnership to ask them to publish their plans for palliative and end-of-life care. Some, of course, have already done this, but many haven't. So I think it would be useful to find out across Scotland what our health and care partnerships are actually looking to do in the future. Now, the Government has pledged that everyone who does die of a terminal illness should have the advanced care plan in place. And that's another area which I believe is ambitious and something everyone across this chamber supports. But the Government has just 12 months to make this happen. Currently, around half of people who die in hospital have one of these in place. So we've got some way to go. So as this is another area, I hope the Minister will be able to respond to see what work has been undertaken to achieve that as well. Getting the environment in hospitals right is incredibly important, and making sure dying people and their friends and families get the space and dignity they need is vital, and that's something I think all members will have had fed back to them from constituents and families. So this study also highlights the role of hospices in caring for people who come to the end of their lives. It's clear from the research that the inpatient capacity of hospices will not grow significantly in the years to come, but they will still care for 5 to 7% of all deaths in their inpatient facilities. All of Scotland's hospices have already begun to increase their outpatient and community services to ensure that they reach many more people beyond their inpatient cohorts, and these services and those of charities like Marie Curie will be needed as we support this shift in the future in the number of deaths from acute setting to community one, as is suggested in the research. Hospice UK suggests the Scottish hospice care for around 19,000 of our fellow Scots currently every year. With many hospices across the UK facing financial struggles and with some closing, there's a real danger that both inpatient capacity could be reduced and support in the community withdrawn, putting additional pressures yet again on the acute care setting. With hospices' roles being so vital to the care of people living with terminal illnesses in Scotland, how can the Scottish Government work with hospices to ensure a sustainable financial future for them? And that's something not just this decade, but beyond. So to conclude, Deputy Presiding Officer, I thank and welcome all parties supporting this motion today. We support the Scottish Government's vision that by 2021, all who need it in Scotland, all who need palliative care, should have access to it. There's been some progress, and we should acknowledge that, but perhaps not fast enough, and there's a danger that we're not going to meet the 2021 vision without real effort over the next 16 months. Even if we do without making palliative care a much higher priority for government and health and social care partnerships, then we could start to fall behind quickly. We should not let that happen. We also face very significant challenges around responding to an increasing number of deaths as time goes on. Finally, I hope this report and today's debate will kickstart a productive discussion how we can build capacity and develop a sustainable service. Thank you very much.
May I ask those in the public gallery not to take part in the proceedings? And we'll move now to the open debate. Speeches of 4 minutes, please. Emma Harper, followed by Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate and congratulate Miles Briggs on securing it this afternoon. And I welcome the Marie Curie members to the gallery here today. I would like to start by also congratulating and recognising the joint research published by Marie Curie and the University of Edinburgh and King's College London into projections of place of death in Scotland by 2040. The research is very insightful and is detailed, as Miles Briggs has highlighted, and it makes a good basis for discussion and debate around social care in Scotland, anticipatory care planning, and how best to manage lifeline social care services in the future. I remind Chamber that I am a registered nurse and, as Deputy Convener of the Health and Sport Committee and a regular attender at the palliative cross-party group, I have a particular interest in our social care sector, and I feel passionately about ensuring we equip the sector and indeed our population for years to come. Presiding Officer, across Scotland and indeed internationally, we are seeing our population ageing better, living longer lives and generally becoming healthier. And while this is welcome, it does present challenges, as with age comes a greater risk of health complications, other comorbidities in health and a greater need for social care support and services. At the Health Committee, we are about to start an inquiry into social care in Scotland, and it will be interesting to see, when we get underway with the social care, how we address many of these issues that we will be highlighting today. And one of the main themes as a society that we must be smarter and better prepared to deal with is our ageing population. The evidence suggests that there must be an onus on healthcare professionals to have realistic conversations with people about their retirement, their wishes and future care needs to best support them to stay at home or in a homely setting and have the best care which suits their needs. I'm pleased that the joint research published by Marie Curie suggests that 2/3 of Scots, 66% of the population, will die at home or in a care home or in a hospice by 2040. So this is encouraging. However, to ensure these projections become reality, there are several steps that we must take. And I'm pleased that the Scottish Government, local health boards and local authorities are already actioning. Research from a consultation which formed part of the information published shows that experts, including clinicians, policymakers, health service managers, academics, social care workers and patients, suggest that to meet the target of more people dying at home, we must increase and upskill our community health and social care workforce through education, but also by valuing care work and by recognising caring as an invaluable profession. We must stimulate a public conversation about planning for the future, also referred to as anticipatory care planning, and discuss realistic medicine. And finally, we must increase and build on the community care capacity through informal carer support and community engagement. I agree with all these outcomes, and I'm pleased that I know many actions are already being taken forward, and I'd like to highlight some work also that I know is currently ongoing across Dumfries and Galloway in my South Scotland region. NHS D&G have several community-based projects aimed at educating the public, families of people with complex health needs, carers and individuals about health and social care. In July last year, I, along with NHS Dumfries and Galloway, we worked together to provide an event in Stranraer to help show people what care is out there for them. We demonstrated a baby box and we had Marie Curie and palliative care discussions there as well. It was a great way to engage the professionals as well as the public about what care is out there. There's another event coming up that's going to look at anticipatory care planning and power of attorney also, which is really important. If we can start to get people to talk about their future wishes, that is something that I would strongly recommend that we take forward. So I know that time is short, and I look forward to hearing everybody's contributions and the response from the Minister. Thank you.
Brian Whittle, followed by David Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I also thank my colleague Miles Briggs for bringing this debate to the Chamber and giving us the opportunity to discuss this very important and difficult topic. I think discussing our mortality is never a comfortable conversation, but I would say, Deputy Presiding Officer, it is my intention to hang around for as long as possible, if not just to continue to annoy and occasionally embarrass my children and grandchildren, because we all must have our fun. However, the report highlights the fact that there will be a significant increase in the numbers of people who will die outside of a hospital setting. And we need to consider how we create a system that will adequately enable that to happen. Projections say, as has already been mentioned, that 2/3 of people will be in that situation. Now, I recognise for politicians that 2040 is a world away. Quite frankly, most of us in here can't see past 2021 and what policies should be put in place to ensure electoral success. But in all of our political manoeuvrings and machinations, we need to find the time to consider a bigger picture. The care home sector already plays a huge role in the care of those in the twilight years, but is already under extreme pressure. We are all aware of closures of care homes within our areas, which again puts the system under a greater strain. And there has been a fundamental change in how care homes are being used. Gone are the days of a few decades ago when they were sometimes seen to, or so-called granny farms. These days, people using care homes tend to enter later in life with much more complex health needs. And we should recognise the skill set that is now required for care home workers and ensure that the staff are upskilled, as the report says. The way in which they are funded, I think, also needs to be reviewed. I've met with several care home operators who are struggling to stay open. They have very little say in the way in which they operate. For example, they're told what they're allowed to charge, what they receive from the council is controlled, as well as the staffing levels required. In other words, there's very little room for manoeuvre, and with staffing costs now exceeding 80% of budget in a lot of the cases, any small change can push them over the edge. So we have to look at the sustainability of the system if we are serious in developing a long-term plan, and we will have to recognise there is a cost associated with that. I think the development of IGBs should be a part of that integrated solution, but currently there is little evidence that that is the case. In fact, I would suggest that the evidence is that the system continues to struggle under increasing pressure. There's also the role of the third sector, such as Marie Curie, and I thank them for their extensive work in developing the report which has sparked this debate. There will have to be an increased role for third sector organisations offering palliative care, end-of-life care, but we all know how difficult it is for them to maintain funding for the services which they currently offer, let alone expand. Deputy Presiding Officer, we would all, I am sure, recognise the incredible work they do and the care that is taken of loved ones and their families as they approach the end of life. The way in which they deliver such a compassionate service is a model of how it should be done. And we will need to consider how we enable and support that level of service long term, and how the third sector are integrated into the health solution. Finally, Deputy Presiding Officer, to deliver this change, you'll know how passionate I am about developing a health care technology system that will support the move towards a more community care approach. And I think this must be the first step. Without a platform that supports good data in and good accessible data out, it will be much more difficult to work an effective solution. Technology in the home is much talked about, and there have been incredible advances in this area. However, the adoption of this tech is very slow. Being able to monitor room temperature, whether the kettle has been switched on or the TV is switched on, helps to allow people to stay longer in their homes. Wearable technology can feed back in real time so much health data that currently requires a trip to the GP, a hospital, or even residential care. Deputy Presiding Officer, this is a complex issue for which there is no silver bullet, but the solutions are all there, I believe. We just have to have the resolve and the courage to make the changes, because if we don't start planning for what is as detailed in the Marie Curie report, Deputy Presiding Officer, we will sleepwalk into a healthcare crisis that will be very difficult to get out of. Deputy Presiding Officer.
David Stewart, followed by Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and could I also congratulate Miles Briggs for securing this afternoon's important debate and for the quality of his opening speech. And I'd also echo his comments about congratulating the work of Marie Curie and their staff, and I know some of them are in the gallery today. This is an issue which has long interested me and has fundamental public health implications for Scotland. Having a right to die at home, in my view, is a basic human right and accords with the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, this Parliament, Presiding Officer, has rightly been praised for its legacy policies going back in time. Free personal care, the smoking ban, and minimum unit pricing for alcohol. In my view, a right to die at home policy could join the illustrious group of legacy policies above that parliamentarians and constituents of the future could look back on with pride. And in a recent Marie Curie opinion poll of Scots, 61% said they would prefer to die at home. And in my region, many Highlands and Islands-based GPs are trained in palliative care, supporting that wish. I'm
very sorry. John Mason.
Thank you very much. I thank the member for giving way. Would you also accept, though, there are a significant number of people who want to be in a care home but are being forced to stay at home?
David Stewart.
Very much so. And in fact, the shorthand I used was dying at home, but I would extend that to say community resources, which includes care homes as well. I would certainly agree with the point that the member raised. So Dying Matters, who are an English and Welsh consortium, showed that around 70% of people would prefer to die at home or at community resources, yet around 50% of people with terminal illnesses actually die in hospital. Now, we all know, Presiding Officer, that more and more people are living longer with increasingly complex conditions, and nationally it's estimated that about 44% of adults in the last year of life have multiple long-term conditions. But I was interested to read just earlier this morning the Marie Curie briefing, and what they made clear, and I'm quoting, is without substantial investment in community-based care, including care home capacity, hospital deaths could rise to 57% of all deaths by 2040. Now, I've been working quite closely with Shetland GP Susan Bowie, and she recently raised with me her concerns about the gap in hospital-to-home care for patients in these categories. And I've also received similar reports from other concerned frontline practitioners from across my region in Highlands and Islands. So when it comes to Shetland, the island currently does not have charities or carers which provide hospital-home care. And other areas of Scotland might also be in the same position, especially in rural and remote areas. So Dr. Bowie said to me that in the past, when someone wished to die at home, she was able to organise volunteer help for families in caring for their relatives, as often children find it difficult to take care of their parents' personal needs. So a list of trained people would be available occasionally if help was required, and to give relatives a break, it was a great low-cost service. However, this was closed in Shetland some years ago, and social care could not fill the gap, so carers were not available at night or at weekends. Now, this has moved on, in fairness, and I've spoken to the Cabinet Secretary, and she's told me that the current model of on-call nursing in Shetland is to be extended to a waking night service using advanced nurse practitioners alongside care staff to support people in the community. This will start this year. However, despite reassurances to the contrary from Shetland IGB, I hear there are still not enough carers and nurses, especially during weekends and evenings. And of course, this will only get worse with an ageing Highlands and Islands population. But I agree with Marie Curie that the care of terminally ill people must be given a higher priority, and there must be more substantial support services. Also, there does need, as the motion rightly says, to be a public debate on death, dying and bereavement. However, we do need to shift the balance to not only training more carers and nurses who are more available to support those who wish to die at home, but make sure these carers are better paid for the valuable job they do. Now, parents have the right currently to have their child born at home, and the NHS provides midwives, but we don't have the right to carers to enable us to die at home. So I see a real policy gap there. I'm very conscious of time, Presiding Officer, and your very relevant stare. So in conclusion, there can be fewer more important policy areas in health than one that provides certainty to those suffering from terminal conditions and the choice over place of death, to spend the last days and hours at home with loved ones rather in hospital with strangers. Thank you.
I think I'll stare at Mr Cole-Hamilton before he starts. Alex Cole-Hamilton, followed by Mark MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too would like to thank Miles Briggs for bringing the debate before Parliament today, and to thank Marie Curie and particularly their nurses, who I know have touched my own life at a time of great sadness, as they have touched the lives of so many members in this chamber. In his book, Being Mortal, Atul Gawande describes human life as a story defined by its key moments and the sum of its parts, not the day-to-day balance of pain and pleasure or success and defeat. And as with all good stories, the ending matters. He writes, "It is not death that the very old tell me that they fear. It is what happens short of death. Losing their hearing, their memory, their best friends, their way of life. Old age is a continuous series of losses." This debate speaks to the heart of that reality. In general, people want things on their own terms in life, right up to the end. We live lives filled with choices of our own design, and yet in our society, the choices available to us begin to evaporate as we near death, particularly if we haven't had those conversations that Marie Curie are so rightly asking each of us to do with our loved ones. That's why talking about it really matters. I'm very grateful to Marie Curie for building this campaign. Because without an expression of will, the families around those who are dying will take difficult decisions based in the moment, shrouded in fear and in grief, and not always to the benefit of the person who is actually dying. And medicine has traditionally capitulated with that. Up until recently, clinicians have focused on what they can do to fix the failing body in those final weeks and months, and have disproportionately weighted to those decisions to the wishes of surviving relatives. One more intervention might prolong life for a couple of weeks, but will often come at the expense of a person's comfort, their dignity, and even their own wishes as to where they die. In every case, death is an enemy that will inevitably prevail. And as Gowande puts it, in that final battle, you don't want a general who fights to the point of total annihilation. You don't want a Custer. You want a Robert E. Lee, someone who knows how to fight for territory that can be won and how to surrender it when it can't. Someone who understands that the damage is greatest if all you do is battle to the bitter end. We are finally recognizing that in the realistic medicine agenda authored and promoted by our own Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Catherine Calderwood. It's a recognition that when confronted with the reality of a situation, end-of-life clinicians often choose one course of action for themselves and another for their patients. Realistic medicine encourages doctors and surgeons to treat patients as adults, to credit them with the maturity to understand the reality of the finality of their situation. And with that knowledge, a surprising number of patients will choose to stop treatment, take a palliative care package, and go home. Because the problem is that by necessity, those life-extending interventions have to take place in an intensive clinical setting. But given the choice, a significant majority of Scots would choose to die at home. Yet at this point in time, less than a third of those are afforded that luxury. And where people die really matters. There is a great deal of empirical academic evidence that shows that people who are allowed to die at home eases not only their own suffering, but the suffering and bereavement process of those around them. 6 months later, those who are surveyed when somebody has died at home report that their mood is better, they're less likely to be prone to bouts of significant depression, and they've been able to move on with a certain closure attached to the belief that they gave their family member their real wishes at those end of life. It's about those conversations. This is the debate, this is the challenge that Marie Curie are putting before us in this campaign. And our answer is really important to that, and this debate speaks to that. Because we need to front-load investment in social care if we're to properly answer this question. We know that there is a social care crisis in our society right now. It causes an interruption in flow throughout the whole of our NHS and is only going to get worse given that death is going to increase by 16% in a very short period of time. We need to provide support to those who give care to those in end of life. We need to make people understand that it can be a tremendously rewarding profession, shaped by moments of poignancy and unexpected joy. We need to make sure that they are well rewarded and properly supported by armies of volunteers. This chamber so often focuses on every aspect of life's journey, but seldom looks at its end. And with helpful interventions like that of Marie Curie and their research, and the debate this afternoon like Miles Briggs, then we can go some way to remedying that. Thank you.
And the last of the open debate contributions is from Mark MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Miles Briggs as a fellow Deputy Convener of the Palliative Care CPG on bringing this debate to the Chamber. It's an issue that I have a very strong interest in, and he's right that it might not be a cheery subject, but it is a necessary subject. It deals with life's greatest certainty, the fact that it will end. And while we have no say on how we come into the world, we should, and I believe we should, strive to afford as much agency as possible to individuals to decide on how and where they leave it. Miles Briggs spoke of the pressures faced by frontline health professionals. It's a debate that often occurs in this Parliament across a range of areas. One of the pieces of work which I found while looking into things ahead of this debate was an evaluation of the Marie Curie nursing service in England, which found evidence of lower total care costs for someone receiving that service compared to a similar individual in receipt of usual end-of-life care, identified around £500 per person of healthcare savings, which could, if you extrapolate from the figures, result in potentially £4.2 million worth of annual savings in Scotland, money that could then be redirected. And there is promising evidence that palliative care interventions are, in and of themselves, cost-effective. but also have improved outcomes such as reduced symptom burden and an increase in people dying in their preferred place, but also could result in reductions in acute care costs and acute care pressures as a consequence. One of the issues that I think needs to be wrestled with in relation to the issues that have been highlighted in this debate is data, and ensuring that there is good data available to drive the policy decisions that are made. If we look again at the National Survey of Bereaved People in England, contributes a considerable amount of evidence which was used in a review conducted by the London School of Economics and Marie Curie. However, no similar survey is undertaken in Wales, Northern Ireland or Scotland, which potentially presents gaps in evidence bases for the devolved nations. I wonder whether the Minister has given any consideration to perhaps seeking to have that survey extended into Scotland, or potentially conducting a survey of our own here in Scotland in order to capture some of that rich data that could be used to improve service provision. Similarly, the minimum data set for specialist palliative care services was another important source of data for that LSE Marie Curie review. However, it only provides data across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. No similar data is available currently in Scotland. So again, one of the questions I've asked the Minister recently is around the Scottish Research Forum for Palliative and End-of-Life Care, which hasn't met now since early 2018. While he said to me that he hopes that it will meet early in 2020, I'd be grateful if he was able to update the Chamber in relation to that, because it's important that the research in relation to palliative care keeps pace and drives the sort of improvements in terms of care that we would want to see to meet the aspirations that have been highlighted in the Marie Curie research. The final issue I want to highlight, and perhaps bring a couple of examples from my own constituency caseload, is around the role of carers, and not just those paid for carers, but also those members of the family who take up the caring role. A review, the LSE review highlighted that having a carer who lived with a patient was the single most important factor associated with home death, whereas living alone or being unmarried increased the likelihood of a hospital death. Now, the number of over 70s living on their own is projected to increase significantly, which could then lead to pressure on community services and increase the number of people dying in hospital or care home settings. Two constituent cases which I just want to highlight, Presiding Officer, both of which relate to individuals with motor neuron disease. The first, H, was admitted to hospital at the age of 81 for a PEG procedure due to unsafe swallow, and was ready to return home for several weeks. Family were receiving support and advice from MND Scotland. However, due to difficulty sourcing care providers in the area, the suitable package was not able to be delivered, and as a result, the patient became too weak and frail to get home and died in the hospital setting. The second constituent, Olive Maver, who I spoke to her husband and he gave permission for me to mention her case in the chamber today, was admitted to hospital again for a PEG procedure, but deteriorated, requiring a full body hoist and breathing support. She remained in an acute ward for 8 weeks, despite being deemed medically fit for discharge due to a lack of carers being available to allow her to return home. It was only as a result of her husband agreeing to take on one of the caring roles alongside the carer being provided by a Health and Social Care Partnership that enabled her to be able to return home and to die at home. And the contrast between those, where one individual did not have somebody to fulfil that role at home and thus died in hospital, but another individual, simply through the fact that they had somebody at home who was willing to fulfil that role, is, I think, an inequity that needs to be addressed, and we need to ensure that we have the services available so that if people wish to leave the hospital setting and to die at home surrounded by family and loved ones, the services are in place to enable them to do so.
I now call Joe Fitzpatrick to respond to the debate for around 7 minutes, please, Minister.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. And on behalf of the Scottish Government, I want to start by thanking Marie Curie, the University of Edinburgh and King's College London for publishing this important research, and add my welcome to the representatives in the Chamber. Also want to thank Miles Briggs for bringing forward this motion, and to colleagues across the Chamber for their thoughtful contributions. As Miles Briggs and other members have already highlighted, the research states that if current trends in where people die continue, then by 2040, 2/3 of all Scots could die in a homely setting, whether at home, in a care home or a hospice. And as David Stewart said, that is the preferred option of most people. And it was very, very thank Alex Cole-Hamilton for his very thoughtful contribution that put into context some of the reasons for why that is the choice that very many people would want to make, and some of the benefits there. The research also suggests that if current trends continue, then more investment would be needed to help ensure that people get care in that homely setting rather than in hospital. These messages are striking and make clear the challenges we face in delivering the care and support that meets the needs of our changing population. However, we're well equipped to meet this challenge. Scotland is already recognised as a world leader in this field, and delivering high-quality, person-centred palliative and end-of-life care has long been a priority of the Scottish Government. I'm proud of the progress that we've made over the past few years through the auspices of our strategic framework for action on palliative and end-of-life care. We've seen more specialist staff in post, improving access to services in a homely setting, and through a programme of health and social care integrations, we've been putting services under the control of integration authorities, which are working closely with professionals, clinicians and local communities. Through this work, people are enjoying greater choice and control over their care, and as a result, pressure on NHS acute care units has been reduced. Families and carers are better supported, and most importantly, the people who could benefit from palliative and end-of-life care are increasingly accessing it. However, as this research illustrates, there is more to do. As Miles Briggs mentioned, our strategic framework for action on palliative and end-of-life care makes clear our ambition that we want those who would benefit from palliative and end-of-life care to have access to it by the end of 2021. To achieve this vision, it's essential that we focus on creating the right conditions nationally to support integration authorities working with a range of partners in the planning of local palliative and end-of-life care services. Integration authorities are working with local communities and building on the expertise of organisations like Marie Curie to commission services that are truly designed to meet the palliative and end-of-life care needs of their local communities. By commissioning services in this way, improvements will be driven through meaningful collaborations and partnerships with the palliative and end-of-life care community. Our ambition to help ensure... Indeed.
David Stewart.
I'm very grateful for the Minister giving way, and I agree with his contents of his speech. Is it in the Minister's plans or in the Government's plans to actually enshrine in law the right to die in a community setting?
Joe Fitzpatrick.
I think it's an interesting point. It's not something I've given great consideration to, but when Mr Stewart raised it in his contribution, I wondered whether that is something we should at least consider. So I think it's certainly something we should consider. But our ambition to help ensure people get the care that is right for them is in a community setting is reflected in our budget this year, which provides investment of more than £700 million to support social care services and speed up the pace of integration. And we're on track to deliver our commitment that more than 50% of frontline NHS spending will be shifted to community health services by the end of this Parliament. And I kind of hope that that direction of travel addresses some of the points that Mark MacDonald was making, which I think recognises that we're not where we want to be yet, but hopefully we are on a trajectory. I'm very conscious of time, and I'm okay? Okay.
Mark MacDonald.
I absolutely hear what the Minister is saying. Would you accept that part of the issue and issues that I highlighted is that there are a number of conditions which increased complexity and also increased lifespan of individuals living with those conditions mean that it's going to be difficult to commission services from the current models, and we need to think about different models of commissioning?
Joe Fitzpatrick.
I think that's true, and I think that's why it's really important that that is being driven in a community basis and on partnership. Mr MacDonald in his contribution mentioned the survey which he happens elsewhere, and I'll certainly take on board to have a look at that and see whether that would be something that would be appropriate for us to either ask to be extended to Scotland or to do ourselves. But I'll certainly look at that and see if that is something that would be helpful. Miles Briggs mentioned hospices, and research also touches on the vital role of hospices and care homes in delivering palliative and end-of-life care. Hospices have long been recognised as exemplars in this field, and now more than ever, they are developing their services to support the needs of local communities. It's important that hospices are supported in this vital work. That's why we're supporting the development of the memorandum. We supported the development of the Memorandum of Understanding between independent hospices and integration authorities. A central tenet of the memorandum is to establish effective reciprocal relationships between integration authorities and hospices. And it's envisaged that this approach will help provide sustainability for hospice services as well as support integration authorities in their duty to make the best use of local assets to provide sustainable and high quality services for their local population. This work has concluded at a national level. However, timescales associated with local adoption of the memorandums are expected to vary depending on the existing arrangements between individual hospices and integration authorities. As Emma Harper covered in her contribution, having a highly trained...
Excuse me a minute, Minister. Can I say to members coming into the chamber, there's still a debate taking place here, so please have respect for that. Joe Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Emma Harper covered in her contribution, having a highly trained and valued health and social care workforce is key to the success of delivering palliative and end-of-life care, particularly in care homes and care-at-home services. In April last year, April 2018, we published a new palliative and end-of-life care education framework that can be used in all health and social care settings to support staff who care for those with palliative and end-of-life care needs in their professional development. The Scottish Social Services Council and NHS Education Scotland are taking forward work to embed this across Scotland. Brian Whittle and others talked about the importance of care homes. We should also remember the care-at-home services supporting people near the end of life. We want to support people to stay at home or in a homely setting for as long as possible near the end of their life. However, the role of care homes and care-at-home services in doing this is often not fully recognised. It's only by providing more palliative and end-of-life care to people in a homely setting that they'll be able to meet the care needs of our ageing population. Integration authorities are already making great strides in this area, and many are undertaking work to review the care-at-home services and structures to help ensure that they meet the local needs now and in the future. Presiding Officer, in closing, I'm optimistic that through the work I've outlined, we'll be able to bring about further transformative change in palliative, end-of-life and community care. But I look forward to continuing to work with Marie Curie and other partners on this shared aim for many years to come. Thank you.
That concludes the debate on research projections into place of death in 2040, and this meeting is suspended until 2 o'clock.